Hello everyone, thanks so much for joining us for this expose of station brilliance. Today's guest wasn't born in Statia, but generations of you probably don't know that. It's because Statia is as much as in her DNA as much as it is in yours, and like the charismatic convert, she's as committed to this island as any, and her impact and influence as a teacher and educator are immense. You know her as Teacher Olive. We call her Olive Berkel. Welcome to Chronicles, Teacher Olive.
Mr. Rose, I am happy to be here, and I thank you for the invitation.
You know, it's amazing because she's addressed me as Mr. Rose, which is fine. Lots of people say that, you know, Johnson is fine.
How do they call you otherwise?
Johnson.
Oh, Johnson.
Yeah, just Johnson. You know, it's
well,
lovely.
What I heard, I'm not so
You're
good
not alone.
on names. I forget names.
No,
yeah.
you're not alone. Lots of people
Yes.
do say Mr. Rose.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
You know,
Yes,
the
yes,
rose does come with thorns, doesn't it? It's
Okay.
not this one.
Wonderful.
But
Nice meeting you.
we're very happy
Yes.
to have you here on the Chronicles of the Wise. I started the introduction by saying you were not born in Statia,
No.
but you're as much as the fabric of Statia as any there is.
Okay.
So born in St. Martin, weren't you?
I was born in St. Martin,
Yeah.
but people tell me that I'm maybe more station than the station people. Well, I've adopted Statia as my island, and I love it. Yes, I was
Yes.
born on St. Martin, though.
So the charismatic convert does describe you quite well.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
when you're a convert, you know, you
Yes,
seem to have that dedication more than any.
Yes, well, I have many reasons for having that.
And we'll talk about those.
Yes.
You spent your first 2 years in St. Martin, where
Martin.
you were born, yeah?
Yes, and my parents emigrated to Aruba, where my father worked in the refinery. And I didn't leave Aruba until I was 18. I had my primary and secondary education there. And I left for the Netherlands, where I remained 5 years. Now, in those days, that's a good time ago because I was 15. No, not 15, I was 18. And that's a long time ago, 1954. And I remained there until 1959. Without coming back home to Aruba.
So 5 years.
5
altogether
years,
in
5
the
years,
Netherlands.
yes. So it wasn't like these days where young people had their phones and, you know, and the contact was pretty difficult in a way because a letter could take 2 weeks, and by the time you corresponded 3 weeks, then you could get an answer to whatever you wanted.
So you're very distant from family.
Oh, yes.
Yes. I want to delve into this a little bit more in just a minute. Do you recall anything at all about this first 2 years in St. Martin?
No, I only...
No memories whatsoever
No,
of it?
I don't remember anything at all. It's just what my parents told me, but I don't remember anything whatsoever. We traveled by boat to Aruba. I don't remember anything of that. I could only remember like when I was 3.5 years old.
Yeah.
Yes.
So from 3.5 on, so
Yes.
So as far as you're concerned, Aruba first and foremost was where you belonged.
Well, as a Windward Islander in those days, Aruba was part of where you belonged. But you look back at St. Martin as home, because that's how your parents
Because that's where you were born,
Yeah.
and because you were born there.
Not only that, my parents, my mother, for instance, was not born in St. Martin. She was born in the Dominican Republic. But St. Martin was for her home. And when you heard them speaking about home, that was St. Martin. So you felt that St. Martin was home at that time, and I felt that for a long time. Yes.
Okay. So St. Martin 2 years.
2
and
years.
Then you went to Aruba up until you were 18.
Until I
so
was
that's
18.
16 years,
16 years,
in
yes.
Aruba,
Yes.
5 in the Netherlands.
Yes.
So by then you were 21.
Yeah, yes.
And then to Curacao, from what I understand.
Curacao, I spent 8.5 years teaching in Curacao.
So I also want to delve into what attracted you to teaching.
Yes, well, I was inspired to teach at that very early age of three and a half, because my mother went to work, and there was a lady who used to keep children and teach them the 3 hours. So by the time I stayed there about 4 years, when I was 7, I already could read and write and do my maths. So I did it
3.5?
from 3.5
You already
to
knew
7.
you wanted to be a teacher.
By 4.
By age 4?
By age 4. And she was a very nice person and very patient with us. And I learned to read pretty early. Before I was 5, I was reading. I was 4, and I loved reading. So much of what I can remember is stooping in the street, seeing pictures and reading on a newspaper, and stoop down to see what that was all about. And I was told that from early on, even before I left St. Martin, that I used to like reading books.
It's astounding, I can imagine. You know, people, obviously, people would probably look at you at this young age and in awe, weren't they?
That young, yes, because where we used to live, I could walk to the lady's house, and people, as you said, were in awe that such a little child could read. So they would give me an apple, sometimes a piece of a banana, or something, because they thought I was doing well. Well, I was only doing what I had learned.
Child genius,
You know?
I would think.
Yes.
Most children at 4, they may be able to pick out a letter or two or a word or two from the book, but to read in that way that you astound people.
Yeah, but I've met some. But then oftentimes their parents were able to help them. But my mother couldn't help me. She couldn't help me with the reading because in the beginning, she couldn't read so very well.
Like many people of her generation and stuff, they probably didn't have a formal education.
No, didn't have a formal education. And she was living not with her parents, because her father died very, very early. She was 87, and her mother she was about number 9 of the 10 children that her mother was left with. So.
And you were one of 11, number 1?
No, I am one of the 11 of
your parents. No,
yeah,
I'm saying you were
number
one of
one.
11 that your mom
But
had.
my mom came from a large family as well. Yes. Yeah. She was number 9 of the 10 of her mother's children. So one of her relatives took her back to St. Martin, where her parents had come from, but the mother always remained in the Dominican Republic.
I can imagine that younger person of today viewing this and can't at all just picture 11 children in one family. They'd probably find this foreign, would they? How is it growing up in a family this large?
Well, it was difficult at times, but we enjoyed it. We enjoyed it. My mother was a disciplined person, very nice person, but she liked to see her house looking spotless. Even though she was working out, she would, if she forgot something and you went back home, you wouldn't believe that this lady going to work at 7, 8 o'clock and having so many children, and they had to go to school, and we had to go to school because she said, I did not get that education, but my children, they're going to go to school and do what they have to do. So much so, I was her secretary. I used to read her letters. I used to write her letters, even her recipes in the beginning, until she could do it for herself.
So she did eventually learn
Yes,
to
yes,
read
yes,
a bit
yes,
and,
yes.
and write.
Yeah.
What sort of pressure was on you as the first? Because I've spoken to a number of people over the years who have had a lot of children.
Yes.
And often the first becomes, as in your case, the mother, if you may. That's,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
surrogate mother, if you may.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I knew from the beginning that I had to set the example. My siblings had to respect me. My mother couldn't go out and leave something to get done, and that I would tell her, so and so didn't want to do it, or so and so said, or so and so did not listen. How you mean? After I told you to get them to do it, they just had to do it. That's it. So, and could you imagine now, the number 2, she was fatter, fairer, and friendlier. Fatter, fairer, and friendlier than I was. And I would say faster too.
And faster too.
Faster too. I was slower when it comes to domestic work and that thing. I like to read books.
Because you were the bookworm.
Yes.
I think that's what they call it.
Yeah.
Bookworms.
Yes. So I would sit, while they are outside playing, I would sit in a corner reading. But we had our chores. So when my mother went out and she came back, the work had to be done. My sister, she would come in, tutus, do her thing and be gone. But I had to take my time and make sure that it got done because my mother wouldn't be happy with she came home and it wasn't done.
Did you have a division of labor back then? These are your chores, these are your sister's chores, these are...
Not a regular thing. My mother would say what had to be done, but the division was for the moment, not to say that everybody had to do this today for the week. And no, that wasn't in the beginning. It wasn't so. Later on, when we got older, yeah.
So, I mean, generally as well, you've got to learn to not just be the mother, you've got to learn to cook and to do the laundry and to do the ironing and all of that. How, were you forced to do that at an early age?
But very early on, the cooking, and I wasn't, I
Too slow for
couldn't,
that.
no, I didn't like that. And up to now, I can cook, but it's not something that I say, well, my sister was the cook, she cooked, she baked. I know that I could help my mother roll the bread or beat the cake because she was a good cook. And she didn't need a lot of things, a lot of spices, or a lot of anything to make a nice and tasty meal. Well, I can put things together. And, well, but ironing and washing, my mother didn't like waste. Now I see some parents, they say, you want to wash your clothes from early, here, even here. Not many, but some in my family, they do. But my mother said, we're going to wash the same time. I don't want anybody wasting my water and my soap powder. And we're going to do things together. So
I know that Aruba and Statia are two completely different islands.
yes.
But the people I've been speaking with for this series have talked about things like we didn't have the running water as such all over. We didn't have cars on the roads. We had to carry water on our heads and
In
stuff.
Aruba?
No, I'm here
Oh,
in Statia,
here.
you know,
Yeah.
way back then. What was it like for you growing up? Did you have to do that? Have to go fetch the water as
No,
well?
in Aruba, we didn't have that. I don't know. There might have been others living, depending on where they lived. But where I was, we had running water. But say the commodity of having flush toilet and things like that. Up to when I was 10 years old, we had an outside bathroom, outside toilet, and then we moved to the project. The first
Project
government,
housing.
yeah,
Yeah.
the first set of new government houses in Aruba. But we didn't have electricity, so some of the folks who lived there at that time would remember that they called it Kerosene Town. So you had a kerosene lamp, the kerosene stove, you know, it was kerosene. So, but afterwards we got our gas stoves and the fridge because you had electricity.
Throughout this conversation, you've made reference to your mom
Yes.
several times.
Oh yes.
She must have been quite an influence in your life, hasn't she?
A formidable woman, a brave woman, a woman of faith. A woman of faith. Could you imagine this lady? She decided after years, after I went to Holland, for instance, she said, when I come back, she would like to have a nice place. Where she lived in the project was good enough. Was a nice, a pretty good project house, but she wanted to have something better. Why too? Unfortunately, she had to leave that house. My father was ill and he was hospitalized in Curacao and things had already not been going well. So she had to leave that project house and to go to another house to live that was not as convenient. And she decided when I come back that we must have a place, a better place. But imagine that doing all of this, of thinking all of this, she was helping others, taking in young people who were in some straits, you know. So outside of us, she also had other folks who would call her mommy. She was their mommy. Yeah.
You learned a lot from her in terms of the faith
Oh,
and
yes. And when it comes to faith, I made because of her example, I made my decisions that I stand by up to today. And but I'm going to tell you this one. when she decided that she wanted to get a place, she tried to get a piece of land. Because my father was not in the picture now again. They never divorced though, but he was one way and she was another. And she decided that she's going to look for a piece of land. Now, this lady hardly didn't have such a good paying job, but she was a proud, independent lady. The church did much to help her with a living place, a dwelling place, but she decided that she is going to do better. And she got a piece of government land. For her Christmas, she got a bonus for her mistress, and she went and she put that down on what she wanted to do. She went, they found a piece close to where she was living. And up to now, if you see, that's a beautiful house she built.
It remains part of the family.
Well, it was government land.
It was government land.
It still remained government land up to now, but yeah.
I made reference to what you were saying about your mom, because
Yeah.
the question I wanted to lead up to was, I was hearing you mentioning your dad, but you've mentioned your father twice now since I asked that question.
Yes.
So how much of an influence was he on your lives?
He was a brilliant man, but he was not as close with us. But there's one thing that I think that I kept from him. He found education very necessary. He was interested in organization, you know. He was interested in world events, and in his way, he was helping people in organizing
I get a sense that, because you've mentioned them both, and you've mentioned helping people.
Yes.
In relation to them both.
Yes, yes.
So I got the sense that you inherited some of that.
That sense of community, knowing that we're not here alone, that my motto is, I am a servant of God and a friend and a helper to my fellow human beings. And I live with that every day. You know, we are not all perfect, but I realize that nobody else is perfect. I am not. You know, so I don't call people ungrateful either. My mother always said, if you can help somebody, if you are called to help somebody, you do what you feel that you have to do without looking back.
It says a lot, doesn't it, about the influence of your mom.
Yes.
You were a couple months short of 88 years old while recording during the period of this recording.
Yeah.
And you still, at this age, reference to my mom said, my mother always said, to say a lot, doesn't it?
I think of her every day. Every day. Her life was exemplary. She had that faith in God. I could write books. I was telling you about this house. She set out to build her house. She made the first blocks, cement blocks, And those were the 6-inch blocks, solid blocks. I have pictures of her. I have pictures of her making the blocks and putting them on the pallet with a 1-block mold. One block. When she died, we were looking for the pictures to make a collage, and the photographer said, "Who is that?" I said, "Well, these are the pictures of the deceased." He said, "Don't tell me anymore." He was so emotional. Yes, and doing all that, working, baking for us, sewing, and she decided that she wanted the best for her children, and God is going to see her through.
Okay,
So,
I know we could talk about your mom
yes,
forever,
yes.
but we've got to also talk about your years in the Netherlands. You are 18 years old.
I was 18 years.
You're on your own, literally, when you go there, are you? Because you're away from family, close family, away from your mom.
Yes.
What was life like settling in the Netherlands?
It was not very difficult for me because we had Dutch teachers, particularly in secondary school, and one of them kind of prepared me, said, "Listen, when you go to Holland, the surroundings are not going to be the same. The people are not going to be the same. Some people may speak to you in a way that you may not like." Or he said, "But remember, there's a lot of ignorance. People don't know a lot about the Antillians and people like you, because this is, say, nearly 70 years ago. And the city where I lived was a nice historic city, but there were very few. There were about a handful of Antillians in that city. Now there are a lot of problems. I didn't take offense if anybody said something funny. I understood that's ignorance. Ignorance. One lady once said, walking behind me, she didn't know that I could speak Dutch or understand it well. She said to her husband, "Do you think that she bathes?" I was living with a Dutch family at that time, and when I came home, and I said that to the lady, she said, "And what did you say?" You didn't answer? I said, "No." I said, she didn't even have to know that I heard. That's just ignorance.
Most people at this age, if you heard that, would have been woefully offended.
Yeah, no. Well, I just say, according to my husband, I said to myself, that she's just a fool. But we were
And 70 years later, you can laugh about it.
Yes, and I never had any funny feeling, really, about it. Earlier on, one of my sisters, her best friend, was a Dutch girl. They were in the class together, and they were best friends. I went to visit that family in another village, and we were walking the road. The people in the bus, many of them hadn't seen many black people close up. When the bus passed and they turned around to what the girl said, "What's wrong with him? Lick out your tongue at them." I said, "No. That's ignorance." And I'm going to tell you this, though. I had a good time with the Dutch people. They treated me, those that I had to deal with, they treated me really nice. At school, very nice, very understanding. I didn't feel any difference. But one thing, you have to know who you are. You don't have to prove anything. Just be you. And when you respect people and you respect yourself, because I didn't have any feeling that I was less than anybody else.
And that's important.
Yes, that's very, very important. And that is not only important there, it's important even among yourself. Oftentimes, and people may not agree, oftentimes we get the treatment that we expect.
Yeah.
Not that
It's a
we
powerful
want.
lesson. Expect.
Not that we want.
Expect.
Maybe the word expect is not it, but you understand.
Oh yeah,
what I mean.
and that's a very powerful,
yes.
powerful statement.
And sometimes what we project is what comes back to us.
See,
But
if you project confidence,
that's exactly
if
the
you
word.
project a sense of I know who I am,
And that respect, and not really showing it up. If it's normal and it's natural, it comes back. It comes back.
great lesson for
Yes,
anyone who's
yes.
viewing this right now.
And yes, and in our dealing with our families, our students, and I try to instill that in my children. You love and respect. Yeah. And acceptance. As a teacher, sometimes we do not know what a child has dealt with at home. And sometimes I get emotional when they're big, grown, say, I felt loved. This is what I went through at home before I came to school. I didn't know. Sometimes the children look like everything is all right. And another thing, children were spanked in those days, and I won't say that I didn't spank any.
For those of you who are viewing, you might have just noticed Teacher Olive pointed in a direction away from the camera. She's pointing at our sound engineer and camera operator and multi-skilled master of all trades, Mikey. Mikey
Proud
Spanner,
of you.
a pupil of yours
Yes.
in your early years here as a teacher in Statia.
In the mid-years. I came in 71. So
yeah, so that's a brilliant time for us to segue into your coming into Statia. I said at the top that while you were not born here, there are many generations here who probably don't know that because they see you as Statia. What, 50 plus years, 52 or so years ago that you came here? Is it
I came here in 1971.
Yeah.
I came here in 1971.
It's a long time ago.
Yes.
So you're, as we said, part of the fabric of the island, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
And as a teacher, you came here.
As a teacher, I think that I had to be here. I'm not
What does
here
that mean? What do you mean? I mean,
I'm not here
here.
by accident because that was about the third or the fourth opportunity for me to come here. And what brought me here, in 1970, I married the love of my life. And I came here in 1971. So I followed my heart. But I was asked if I didn't want to come here. But the story is a long story, because we met, my husband and I, when I was 15, still in just in secondary school, and he let me know that he would, of course, like me in later on, you know, to come to Statia. So I would say that was my first introduction to Statia. But that relationship broke up because I had to go. I wanted to go to study, and he did not have that opportunity. But I thought that it was very important, and here I prayed, Lord, if I'm not supposed to go to study, I would be satisfied if you put something in the way. Could you understand? If something else comes in the way, then I would be sure. I would like to go, but yeah.
Just throw a Berkel in the way somewhere.
No. The Berkel was there, but the fact is that, of course, you wanted to stay close to the Berkel. So
anything.
Study was important.
Yeah.
And to go to study to be a teacher was a dream from small, as I said, at 4 years old. But now I'm 18, and there is somebody who is interested, and I am too. But my calling, yes, I
so
want to be a teacher.
This is the proverbial fork in the road.
Yes.
Where people say you've reached that fork in the road.
Yes.
Which one do you take?
Yes. So, well.
Clearly, the Lord didn't listen to you. Didn't
Well,
put
the Lord
something in the
listened.
way.
He did. No. I didn't ask him to put them. Thy will be done. Thy will be done. That if something came in the room, well, I say, well, the choice was made. So everything went smooth. Everything went smooth, and I went crying first. Crying first. But I said, well, this is it.
Mm-hmm. And everything came back, as the old saying goes, full circle.
Well,
you got back to Berkel.
Yeah, the opportunity to come back within a year or so. Of course, a letter came, but that was not an option. I went focused. I could not put that on anybody's plate, and that is what I said from then. My career, my life, I can't put that on somebody's. And these kind of decisions you have to make for yourself. And I made that decision, and that was where it was. And I wasn't going to change my mind after the die was cast. It was cast. But years after, when I came back, yeah, and one of the reasons he couldn't wait so long, because I had to study 5 years and I had to come back and work for the government for 5 years. Well, after 16 years, well, it came back full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A fairy tale ending, if you may, in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah.
And legend has it that when people like you and me come to Statia, we don't want to leave it. It sucks us in, and
yes.
and And you stay, you become part and parcel of it. So
I never felt strange here in Statia because in Aruba there was a nucleus, a group of stations that I met from very small. My father being the community person, you know, they helped set up organizations. Set by Mrs. Flanders for the whose name is mentioned with the community center. And I knew that family from small, working in societies, the BIA, you know, you had the UNIA, the CMIA, and SWIA, or, you know, so.
So you felt
so
at home.
Yes, I felt
so I'm
at
going to
home.
ask you the tough question, the toughest of all questions I will ask you today. Even before we go into your teaching, because we've got to talk about the teaching here and the many people whom you've molded over the years. So the most difficult question I will ask you today is, if St. Martin, Aruba, the Netherlands, Curacao, several years, I mean, cumulatively, you've spent more time in Statia than all of the others combined. Which one is home?
Well, this is home, home, home. I don't say, I feel at home in Aruba too, but this is home. I've spent most of my life. I came here in 1971. So that tells me that I have 51 years here on the island. So this is the place where I don't plan to go to live anywhere else but in eternity. Yes. Uh-huh.
And so you're home, and lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about teaching in Statia. First of all, 50 plus years ago, and compared to now, or at least up to the point where you stopped teaching in the 2005 or thereabout, when you eventually gave it up. How did you see it evolve in teaching? As both from the perspective of the teacher and that of the student, pupil.
Yes, before we zero in on Statia, I taught 11 and a half years between Aruba and Curacao. So I do have a comparison. In those islands, Dutch was the language of instruction then, and but the background of the students was not Dutch. In Curacao, the background was Papiamento, Aruba as well. But depending on what school where you taught, the background of the students was English too. And I met students from Statia down there. Many of those children who came and were in the class with me in Aruba, they did not have the Dutch language background like we had in that time. But dual language is never very easy. Coming up here, Dutch was the language of instruction, but the children, English was the language at home. Now, I noticed after a while we did have a switch where there was more English than Dutch, and I noticed there was a difference in the performance of the children.
Improved?
The spontaneity, the interest. So before that, I thought, well, Dutch, we are on a Dutch island and we have to study further. In Dutch, we should focus on Dutch. And when I noticed when they had that period, you can teach the top 10 anything, and they achieve. The middle group, well, they would not achieve as well, but to a certain extent. The lower group, you have to teach them in their language, their mother tongue, and the middle group improves in certain things better in their mother tongue. The United Nations was really pushing for the language of instruction to be the language of the home background. So how are you going to do that? We have tried, and sometimes you get a bad rap. It's not really feasible to have two languages taught on that same level. One is supposed to be the language of
One is
instruction.
your primary language,
Yes,
isn't it? Yeah.
and the other one is supposed to be the second language. And we have been fighting with that. When the one that you focus on, you get a lot of improvement on. But say, that's when you were doing Dutch. You got a certain amount of success, but not what you would have envisioned if the child was immersed in his or her, in that language. You never had that immersion in Dutch here. So that's one difficulty. And the child's language, the mother tongue, you don't get it right either.
So what I'm hearing here, and correct me if I'm right, that you've got two languages, but you can't master either. Is that it?
You can't master either to the level that you want to. Because I could be educated, and I could see that in Curacao. You studied Dutch, you're from an English background, and the society was Papiamento, and you go up there to give a speech in English, if you have to. But your English is often not on the level of your
stature.
Your stature. Grammatically or otherwise. No, I learned English from small. Before I started to learn Dutch, I learned English in that little private school with that lady who inspired me by how she worked with us to be a teacher. And the first degree outside of my teaching degree I did was English as a foreign language. I did that in Holland years after.
So it must have been quite a challenge for you, wasn't it, to be here, to be teaching, in instructions in a language that the pupils aren't as comfortable with?
Well, when I go back to Curacao, that was challenging, but we all learned a lesson. Those children came from a Papiamento background. I, from an English background, studied in Holland, and I came not teaching these Papiamento children, and I didn't speak Papiamento myself, although I was brought up in Aruba. That couldn't happen now because the society has changed. But when I was there in Aruba, certain areas were more English-oriented. The community, your neighbors, the stores, the shops, the refinery, you know, the foreigners who came in to work there, St. Nicholas. But going to Curacao now, I could hardly speak a word of Papiamento. People may not believe that. But I learned Papiamento from the children because I taught first grade. And they learned Dutch too. They learned
because they're
Dutch
quite
well.
early. But when you came here, it's a completely different picture altogether, as you said.
Yes.
Papiamento is not the language of communication here in Statia.
No.
It's English. So how...
It should have been easier.
It should have been easier, shouldn't it?
Yes. Well, having that kind of background, and it depends on the methods that you use as well. And the curriculum, we began here Dutch as a language of instruction, but you did not get as far with the Dutch as you would have liked. And the children had to move from here down to Curacao and Aruba, which made it a bit difficult for them because they got into a different environment, a Papiamento Dutch environment. And here, just like you hear, everything in the society is English down there, everything in the society is Papiamento. How do you prepare them for that? You know? Now, with the change to English as language of instruction, there was a whole lot of discussion, and what I would not have thought years before, I was a proponent of English as a language of instruction, but with a strong Dutch component, a second language. But to me, that never came, that strong Dutch never came up beside it. First grade, you began from kindergarten. I taught kindergarten out at Lynch, and I taught the children a lot of Dutch, a lot of conversation, a lot of the vocabulary. But when it came to they went first grade, second grade, and third grade now was this class that switched over. And that was not easy because how to get that smooth transition. The teachers in the English in the kindergarten, teachers in first grade, second grade, were usually our teachers, or teachers who were well familiar with English and Dutch. When the child got to the third grade now, you had to switch over. You have, oftentimes, you had Dutch teachers, sometimes people who did not know the background of the children, and the switch over was not easy because the Dutch that they went over there with was not sufficient if the teacher did not know the transition. The methods did not lend themselves as for a smooth transition.
You must have done a pretty good job with Mikey.
Excuse me?
You must have done a pretty good job with Mikey.
Well, I tried my best with everybody. I don't know. I tried my best.
Can you recall who some of the most prominent people who were among the first whom you taught here in Statia?
Well, I had, when you say prominent, you mean...
Names that people will recognize easily.
Well, Louis Duggins, Gary Brown, Ellie, the Houtman boys, I just call for Leslie some quarters, and so I had 30 odd students. And these days the classes are much smaller.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I go in, I see classes of about 17, yes. Maybe so about half of what you had back then.
Yes, that was. I had a 30 odd in many of the classes.
So you taught at the government school, did you?
Taught the government school in the beginning. I taught 20 and a half years in the government school. Yeah. And there was something that I would like to mention too. The teachers that we had, very good teachers, but the majority of the teachers were from away, from Holland. And they came on a contract. And they're here on a contract of maybe 2 years, at the most 3. By the time a teacher comes, and you have to get adjusted, climatized, get to know the children, the people, so that's a whole year of adjustment. Then you get the second year, and things start. Now you're really getting comfortable with the circumstances, with the methods, and then you have to start thinking of next year, within a year's time, after a while, I'm leaving. So that is the continuity has also been a problem.
To a certain degree, isn't that still an issue to this day? Maybe not as, obviously, as profound as it was back then.
Yes, I should think so. But some teachers, after a while, some teachers have stayed on, yeah? But in those early years that I was here, most of the teachers left after a few years.
So you spent 20 plus years, just over 20 years at the government school, molding the future. Must have been 20 really very good, satisfying years for you, quite happy. You call it a privilege.
A privilege, yes. Because it is something that I loved, and if you as a teacher of all professions don't love the profession, I don't love the children, that is, for those who are seeking to find a profession, the teaching profession is not for you. Yeah, because it is not. Sometimes you ask, can you pay such a person? The money was important, but not the most important for me at all. No. I loved going to school every day. I loved to be with my students, and I wanted them to feel comfortable and to feel loved. And even if they got punished, they had to feel that it was not just for, to hurt them.
It was love.
Yes,
Yeah.
love.
Yes.
And respect. Yes.
You retired.
Respect.
You officially retired after 20 or so years.
20 and a half years.
Officially.
Officially,
Yeah.
but many people may not have known it back then. I was also principal of the Lynch Plantation Kindergarten School. I have started up that kindergarten school. It was a private foundation, family foundation. And I was principal there while I was teaching the other school. I mean, the inspection department, the education inspection department knew because I had to report to them. But I was working full time, and so but I represented that. We met with the teacher, got timetable together, met with inspection, parents meetings, and all of that during that time.
And then you did that, and then the SDA.
Yes, and then when the SDA, I started the SDA. Yeah, at least I sat in the first year because there was supposed to be another teacher to begin the school board, and they didn't come, so I took over, and then I volunteered after I retired. I volunteered a bit, and then I became principal. Mm-hmm.
And after what 2005?
2005. Yes. 2005. I was 69 years and 10 months. Yes, I retired.
Do you, I mean, after all of these years as a teacher and you've retired, do you miss it?
Not really. Not really. Because my interest is in teaching and in people, in family, in church, service. So I'm still busy. I am still busy. When I leave here, I got to get in contact with family, and I should be going writing letters and report. So you busy?
So after all of that, you've dedicated your entire life, really, to the profession and to the pupils and to building and forming and creating and all of that. You can walk away and say, I don't miss it a bit.
I don't miss it because it is part of my life, a very important part of my life that I felt that was not accidental, and by God's grace and His help, I was able to do. And I feel happy when I go on the road and I see them, and I tell people, my children have the biggest smile on this island. The biggest smile on the island. Don't care who they are or where they are.
But
when I see them, they smile.
you call them your children.
Yeah.
And your grandchildren too, from what I gather, their children are your grandchildren.
My grandchildren. Yes, by now I have great-grandchildren. But I'm very thankful, and sometimes I feel humbled for the love that I receive in the community. Yes. I drive on the road and very graciously, sometimes they stop and slow down and they blink, the teacher, go ahead,
And they probably didn't even know that you were not born here. As far as they're concerned,
Yeah,
but
some don't know.
You just stationed.
Some heard and some heard and forgot. So some people say I'm more stationed than the station people themselves. Some family members and others say so. But I feel quite comfortable. And I have the confidence that if I fall down, well, I fell down and I fell down once and so many came and picked me up. It's a good thing I still could dust off and move, but I have that confidence that I am in the right place.
Yeah. One of my favorite people here in Statia is a teacher who works really very hard and puts everything into it. What advice do you have for her and for other teachers of today?
Teaching will not be easy, and there are increasing difficulties in the society because of the changes of parents not being at home and the exposure to all kinds of things. Months ago, there was a grandmother at home to help, and it's no more. But if you love the profession, it is one of the most rewarding. And those children or young people who may seem to give you the most trouble, by God's grace, do the best you can. Set the best example. Give the love. It comes back to you.
Teacher Olive, thank you so very much for sharing with us some of your wisdom with us. Well, that's our program for today. Please don't hesitate to share your questions and your comments. And use the hashtag Chronicles of the Wise, will you? We appreciate that. And here's also an invitation for you to join us again next time for more compelling stories from some of Statia's most riveting and its wisest. Until then, from all of us here at GIS Statia, it's goodbye.